By the time I was in my car, driving away from our house, it was almost 7 o'clock. Katie generally didn't leave for work until 8 o'clock. I had an hour to kill before I could safely return home and pack the bags I was going to take with me to San Francisco. Stopping at a local cafe, I bought a copy of the morning newspaper and ordered breakfast. I was just finishing my eggs and sausages when my cell phone rang. I checked the caller. It was Dana. Good morning, Frankie. Morning, Dana. Can you talk? Yes. I'm eating breakfast at Emily's cafe. I have to wait until Katie leaves the house so I can go back and pack my bags for California. Have you talked to Jeff Wheeler this morning? He just called me. He told me that he got a clear recording of last night's activities. He's having a messenger service bring 2 copies over to me. Are you going into your office this morning? Yes. Right after I'm finished packing my bags. Do you want me to have the messenger service bring one of the discs to your office? Thank you. I'd appreciate that. Frankie. I'm in my car driving to my office. As I was leaving the house this morning, Pete got up. He told me that he had to go to Chicago today for an evening meeting with a client. He said that he won't be home until tomorrow afternoon. He's planning to spend the entire night at my house. Yes, he is. I'm going to enjoy interrupting his little party. I can't wait to see the look on his face when we walk into your bedroom. I wonder if they'll be using our bedroom. Maybe Katie will insist on using the guest room. Maybe. But you heard what Pete said in the bar. When it comes to getting what he wants, my husband can be very persistent. Yes, we'll find out tonight. Won't we? Yes, we will. Are we still meeting for dinner at Murphy's Bar and Grill at 5:30? I'm looking forward to it. I think I'm going to be awfully nervous by then. It will help to have some company. I agree. Frankie, I'd better go. Can I have the messenger leave the CD with the receptionist at Jupiter Construction? Yes. But ask him to be discreet. I'll remind him and I'll make sure that it's in a sealed envelope. Thanks, Dana. Bye, Frankie. I'll see you at Murphy's. Bye, Dana. As I put my cell phone away, I noticed that it was 8:05. Katie should be on her way to work. I quickly finished my breakfast and paid my check. 10 minutes later, I was driving slowly by my house. I didn't see any signs of Katie. At the end of the block, I made a U-turn and came back. As I pulled into our driveway, I pushed the button on my garage door opener. If Katie's car was still there, I'd park, go inside and tell her that I'd returned to get an important document that I'd forgotten and I was going to take the 11 o'clock flight. I had a number of files in my desk in the den. I'd just take one of them, leave and return later in the day. Fortunately, her car was gone. I pulled into the garage, parked and went inside. It took me about a half hour to pack 2 suitcases with enough clothes for San Francisco. As soon as I was finished, I checked to make sure I hadn't left any obvious signs that I'd been home, and then I loaded the 2 suitcases into the back of my Ford Escape and left. 20 minutes later, I was parking in front of Jupiter Construction. As I walked through the main office, Myra, the receptionist, called to me. Frankie, a messenger just left this for you. She was holding up a manila envelope. I took it from her. Thanks, Myra. You're welcome, Frankie. Overwhelmed with nervous anticipation, I hurried into my office and turned on my laptop computer. While it was booting up, I opened the envelope and took out the CD. For a moment, I stared at the silver disc, wondering if I really did want to hear anything that might be on it. Finally, I decided that as painful as it was going to be, I had to know. I had to be certain. Filled with apprehension, I sat down at my desk, slipped the disc into my computer, opened the media player and clicked play. I heard the sound of a door opening, and then it closed again. Someone seemed to be moving around in the room. I heard another door open. After a moment, the toilet flushed, and then I heard the sound of running water. There was more movement in the room. I heard a knock on the door followed by rapid footsteps. Hi, it was a man's voice. Munson. Hi, it was Katie. This morning, Frankie told me he's going to Kansas City tomorrow, and he won't be back until Thursday afternoon. Really? Munson's voice was suddenly filled with excitement. Yeah, want to get together? Right, I do. Can we do it at your house? Can you stay for the whole night? Hell yes. I'll tell Dana that I have to go to Chicago for a meeting with a client, and I won't be back until Thursday. I paused the recording. Who was this woman and why was she doing things with Munson that she refused to do with me? Katie kept saying things that suggested she still loved me, but she was treating me like a chump. What was I supposed to believe? Her words or her actions? The old saying was actions speak louder than words, and at that moment Katie's actions were blaring at me like a storm siren. Deciding that I needed to take a short break, I went down the hall to the bathroom and splashed some cold water on my face. On my way back to my office, I stopped at the table by Myra's desk and poured myself a cup of coffee. Fortunately, Myra was on the telephone, so I didn't have to make conversation with her. At that moment, I wasn't in the mood for small talk. Once I was back in the refuge of my office, I sat down at my desk and took a sip of coffee. The warm liquid had a soothing effect. Feeling mildly revitalized, I clicked the play button on my computer screen. I clicked the stop button on my computer screen. I'd heard enough. Sighing, I slumped back in my chair and closed my eyes. I was overwhelmed, emotionally drained, and confused. I didn't know what to think. I just listened to a recording of my wife with another man in a motel room. I felt hurt and betrayed, and I was certain that my marriage was over. Still, it was a complicated situation. A very complicated situation. There were so many unanswered questions. Katie had made it clear to Munson that she didn't love him. She'd told him that she didn't even like him. They weren't friends. If that was true, then why? Why would she do things for this man who she didn't even like, and then refuse to do the same things for the man she claimed to love? And the things she'd told Munson about her past. Katie was always so prim and proper with me. I never would have suspected. Who was this woman that I'd married? I sighed again. Actually, I was fairly open-minded. She'd done things that were unconventional, but there really wasn't anything inherently wrong about them. What bothered me was that she'd decided to conceal that part of her life from me. It was clear that she didn't trust me. I thought she loved me, but if she loved me, why not share her desires and fantasies with me? Maybe to her I really was an old stick-in-the-mud engineer, but if she believed that, why did she marry me? Remembering that I was leaving for California in the morning, I pulled myself together. I had work to do. I didn't have time to wallow in personal misery. After taking a few minutes to make a list of the things I needed to accomplish before I left, I walked to the electronics store 2 blocks down the street and bought an MP3 player with a small attached speaker. As soon as I returned to my office, I loaded the recording of Munson and Caddy's tryst onto the MP3 player and stopped it at a key point. Once that was done, I went to work cleaning up the loose ends on the 3 projects I'd been working on for Jupiter. It was 2:15. I'd just finished my work on all 3 projects and was busy cleaning off my desk when Myra walked into my office. "Frankie, Irv would like to see you for a few minutes." "Tell him I'll be right there, Myra." 5 minutes later, I was knocking on Irv's doorframe. "Hey Frankie, come on in." "What's up, Irv?" "Have a seat." "Okay." I sat in one of the leather chairs in front of his desk. As soon as I was settled, he said, "I didn't think you were coming in today. I still had a few details that I needed to take care of before I leave." "How are things going with Katie?" "Not good. She met her lover in a motel last night. A detective made a recording of their meeting. It was bad. Really bad." "I'm sorry to hear that, Frankie. Are you going to proceed with the divorce?" "Irv, I don't think I have a choice." He nodded. After a moment he asked, "So I assume that you still want me to tell Myra to make the changes to your 401k and how your paychecks are deposited?" "Yes, Irv, I do. I'll tell her in the morning." "Will that be all right?" "Yeah, that will be fine. Reitman Construction has arranged for you to stay at the Claymount Inn. It's a small hotel on the edge of downtown. All their rooms are luxury suites." "It sounds nice." "Believe me, it is." "They also agreed to let me borrow you for a day or two every few weeks, so you can plan on coming back for an occasional visit." "Good. It will be nice to be able to come home once in a while." "Myra has your plane ticket and rental car information. She got you a small SUV. I hope that's all right." "It will be just fine. You know me, Irv. I'm not into fancy vehicles." Irv stood up and walked around his desk. Knowing that this was his way to signal the end of a meeting, I stood up too. Extending his hand, Irv said, "Frankie, we'll miss you. I am sorry about you and Katie. Maybe this change of scenery will help you get through it." "I hope so, Irv." After we shook hands, I returned to my office and quickly finished cleaning off my desk. Once that was done, I picked up my briefcase and my laptop computer and left. On my way out, I stopped at Mira's desk. "Irv said you have my plane ticket and rental car information." She handed me an envelope. "It's all in here, Frankie." As I took it from her, Myra said, "Frankie, I'm going to miss you." "I'll be back." "I know, but I'm still going to miss you." I smiled at her. "I'm going to miss you too, Myra." And then I turned and left the building. I still had 2 remaining tasks to take care of before I met Dana at Murphy's Bar and Grill. I needed a safe place to store my escape while I was in San Francisco, and I had to find a place to stay that night. I knew that after the impending confrontation with Katie and Munson was over, there wasn't any way I was going to be able to spend the night at the house. I drove to a secure parking garage near the airport and leased a space for the next 3 months. Once that was done, I checked into a nearby hotel. I was seated at the bar at Murphy's sipping a pint of Harp when Dana arrived. It was exactly 5:30. I stood up and called to her, "Hey Dana." Smiling when she saw me, she walked over, kissed my cheek, and said, "Let's grab a booth." I picked up my beer and followed her. We sat opposite each other rather than on the same side of the booth. In the future it was possible that we might become lovers, but both of us understood that this was not the appropriate evening for that to occur. As soon as we were settled, Dana said, "Frankie, I'm so nervous." "I understand. I am too. Put's been a rotten husband, But I once loved him, and we've spent 12 years together. Realizing that it's all about to come to an end is difficult. Yeah, it is. Katie and I have only been together for about a year, but I thought she was the love of my life. Shrugging, I added, I'm not sure that's changed. I think she might always be the love of my life. Did you listen to the recording? Most of it. I had to stop before I got to the end. I learned a lot about my wife. I guess I really didn't know her. The waitress arrived. Dana ordered a beer. I still had most of mine. We both ordered cheeseburgers and we added a large order of French fries to share. After the waitress was gone, I said, I'm not a prude. I really don't care about the things she was doing in college. None of it is really that big a deal to me. What bothers me is that she didn't try to include me in it. She not only didn't include me, she deliberately hid it from me. She deliberately excluded me. Are you saying that you wouldn't have minded Katie having an affair with Pete if she told you about it? I laughed. No, I don't think I'm that open-minded. How about if she just did a guy in the back seat of his car outside Bratis every Friday night? You know, a stranger. A guy she'd never see again. Would that have been okay? I guess that would have been better. But why did she have to do other guys at all? Why couldn't she just be with me? From the things she said to Pete, I got the impression that she likes a little variety. Yeah, okay. I got that idea too. But why did she have to hide it from me? She should have been upfront about it, and told me before we got serious about each other. At least then I could have had a choice about whether or not I wanted to be in a relationship like that. Why did she have to pretend? When she was around me, she always maintained the facade of a prim and proper lady, a prude. Why did she have to do that? I don't know, Frankie. Maybe you should ask her. Maybe I will, but not for a while. It's going to take some time before I can stop being mad at her. I'm glad I'm going to San Francisco tomorrow. The waitress brought our food. The cheeseburgers and French fries were good. We made small talk while we ate. I told Dana more about the job in San Francisco, and then we talked about places that we'd like to visit. Pete didn't like to travel, so Dana had never really been anywhere. I was so busy going to school that I never had either. Dana told me that she wanted to see London and Paris. I agreed. Both of those cities were at the top of my list too. After we finished eating, we had a short disagreement about who was going to pay the check. We decided to split it. By the time we were walking out of the restaurant, it was 6:30. We stopped on the sidewalk by our cars so Dana could call Jeff Wheeler. Hi, it's Dana Munson. Is anything happening? Dana listened for a moment and then she said, okay, we should be there in about 15 minutes. She switched off her cell phone and looked at me. Pete and Katie are at your house. They arrived together about 30 minutes ago. Pete parked his car in your garage stall. Katie's trying to be discreet. She doesn't want the neighbors to see his car. Jeff Wheeler has his van parked around the corner on Benson Avenue. He said the cameras and microphones are all working perfectly. He's recording everything. Let's go. I'll follow you. I'll call my dad and the lawyers while we're driving over there. Jeff wants us to meet him at his van before we go into the house. Okay. I got into my car, and Dana got into hers. Filled with nervous apprehension, I pulled away from the curb. As I accelerated down the street, I checked the rear view mirror. Dana was right behind me. Making sure she was keeping up with me, I drove by my house. The living room drapes were closed. There wasn't any indication that anyone was at home. Of course, it was a midsummer evening. At 10 minutes to 7 there was still full daylight. There wasn't any need to have the lights turned on. At the corner we turned on to Benson Avenue. A van with the logo, Wheeler Cable Repair, painted on the side was parked to houses down the block facing us. I made a U-turn and parked behind the van. Dana parked behind me. We got out of our cars. Dana knocked on the back door of the van. A second later, it opened and Jeff Wheeler stepped out. Inside I could see a technician monitoring an array of electronic equipment, including several flat-screen television monitors for radio receivers and 3 laptop computers. A large, well-muscled black man was sitting in the front seat of the van. Nodding to us, Jeff Wheeler said, Ms. Munson, Mr. Reese, good evening. They're in there, but for a while I thought they were going to leave. I looked at him with a puzzled expression. What do you mean? He shook his head. It was the funniest thing. As soon as they got into the house, the way they were going at it, I thought they were going to do it right there on the living room couch. But then Mr. Munson suggested they move into the bedroom. When they entered the hall leading to the den and the bedrooms, Mr. Munson tried to pull your wife into the master bedroom. She wouldn't go. She told him they had to use the guest room. Mr. Munson tried to persuade her that they'd be more comfortable in the master bedroom, but your wife wouldn't budge. She was adamant that they were not going to go in there. Mr. Munson tried to insist. Your wife still wouldn't budge. She told him that they were going to use the guest room, and if he didn't like it, he could leave. Left with that ultimatum, Mr. Munson grudgingly acquiesced. Dana smiled. That's my husband. He has to play his games. I smiled back at Dana, and Katie didn't let him do it. Nodding, Dana said, Frankie, Regardless of what she's done, it's obvious that your wife still cares about you. Jeff Wheeler said, I know that you heard some pretty shocking things on that recording we made at the motel last night, but I have to agree with Ms. Munson. I think your wife does still care about you. I know, but it's going to be hard for me to get by the lying and the deceit, and I can't understand why she's willing to do things for him that she won't do for me. Jeff Wheeler looked at me with a puzzled expression. Realizing what he'd just learned, I was suddenly overwhelmed with embarrassment. Noticing my discomfort, he said, Don't worry, Mr. Reese. This is my business. I hear this kind of stuff all the time. I never gossip, and I don't judge people. He smiled. If it makes you feel any better, my wife won't let me do it either. All three of us laughed. I said, But I'll bet your wife isn't letting some other guy do it to her. Jeff Wheeler grinned at me. I hope not. I'd hate to have Ricky looking at videos of Janice and some well-hung hunk. He nodded towards the technician monitoring the equipment in the van. We laughed some more. The laughter was good. It helped relieve the tension that Dana and I were feeling. I was just about to ask what was happening now when a black Mercedes-Benz turned the corner followed by a silver Lexus. Both cars parked across the street from us. Arthur Kendall got out of the Lexus and his lawyer, Herm Bennett, and a younger man got out of the Mercedes. Mr. Kendall walked over to Jeff Wheeler and asked, Are they in there? Do we have enough incriminating video? Can we go inside? Jeff Wheeler looked into the van. Hey Ricky, do we have enough? Yeah, we got plenty. Keep recording. Don't worry, I am. We've got enough. Let's go. He turned back to the van. Jerome, we're ready for you. The large black man got out of the van. As he walked over to us, Jeff Wheeler said, This is Jerome. His job is to make sure that no one gets hurt tonight. He looked at me. Mr. Reese, that includes Mr. Munson and your wife. He paused for a moment and then he said, Mr. Reese, Ms. Munson, please forgive me, but I need to be certain that you're not armed. I smiled at him. It's okay. I understand. You don't want us to end up on the 10 o'clock news. That's right. Jerome reached into the van and took out a plastic basket and an electronic metal scanning wand. After he handed the wand to Jeff Wheeler, he held out the basket and said, Please put everything you have in your pockets into this basket. I took my cell phone, my wallet, my money clip, the loose change I had, and the MP3 player with the attached mini speaker out of my pockets. Then I removed my wedding ring and wristwatch and set everything in the basket. Jeff Wheeler quickly ran the wand over me. As soon as he was done, he said, Thank you, Mr. Reese. You can put everything back now. As I put my belongings back in my pockets, he turned to Dana. Ms. Munson, do you have anything in your pockets? No, nothing metal. I am wearing a wristwatch, a necklace and 2 rings. Would you please remove them and set them in the basket? Of course. Behind me I heard Arthur Kendall growl, Is this really necessary? Next to him, Herm Bennett said, Yes, Arthur, it is. Mr. Wheeler doesn't know Mr. Reese and your daughter. This is a precaution he has to take. He's very thorough. That's why you hired him. Arthur Kendall reluctantly said, Okay. Dana put her watch and jewelry into the basket and handed her purse to Jerome. As soon as Jeff Wheeler was done wanding her, he asked, May I look in your purse? Dana said, Of course. Jerome handed Dana's purse to Mr. Wheeler. He took a quick look inside and then held it for Dana while she put her jewelry and watch back on. Once she was ready, he handed her purse back to her and said, Okay. We're ready. Mr. Reese, Ms. Munson and Jerome will ride over to the house together in Mr. Reese's self. He looked at me. Mr. Reese, park in front of the house and try to be quiet. Unlock the front door. Leave it open so that we can follow you. Once you're inside the house, quietly lead Ms. Munson to the guest bedroom. Jerome will trail behind you. He's only there to stop trouble if it starts. Ms. Munson should go into the bedroom first and quietly greet her husband. Turning to the others, he said, As soon as Mr. Reese's car turns the corner, you'll wait for 1 minute and then get into your own cars and follow them. Park in the street. Do not park in the driveway. Go into the house quickly. Mr. Bennett, do you have the divorce papers? Mr. Bennett nodded towards the young man who was with him. Yes. Dave has them. Is Dave going to serve them? Yes. Dave, give Mr. Reese and Ms. Munson an opportunity to have their say. Then step forward. Jeff Wheeler turned to us. The two of you should step back at that point and let Dave do his job. Dana and I both nodded. All right. Let's get started. Ms. Munson, leave your keys with me. I'll bring your car. Dana opened her purse and took out her car keys. After she handed them to Jeff Wheeler, she turned to me and asked, Are you ready? Yes. Let's go. As we walked to the car, Jerome said, I'll ride in the back. Dana said, Jerome, you're a big guy. Let me ride in the back. Jerome shook his head. No, Mom. Thank you. But when we do this, I try to be as unobtrusive as possible. It's better if I ride in the back. Dana nodded. We got into the car. As I pulled away from the curb, Dana said, Frankie, I'm so nervous. I know, Dana. So am I. I pulled up to the curb in front of my house and stopped. The drapes were still drawn tightly shut. As I shifted my SUV into park, Jerome said, "Quiet now. We don't want to do anything to alert them." Dana and I both nodded. We silently opened the doors, slipped out of my Escape, and gently closed them again. We looked at Jerome. He gestured towards the front door. I led the way. Dana and Jerome followed me. On the front steps I opened the storm door, pushed my key into the lock and turned it. I felt it click. After putting my key away, I turned the doorknob, quietly opened the door and stepped inside. Dana and Jerome were right behind me. I immediately heard Caddy's voice. Next to me, Dana grasped my wrist. I turned. She was smiling at me. She whispered, "Be strong, Frankie." I smiled back at her. We silently passed through the kitchen and the dining room. Moving as quietly as we possibly could, we entered the hallway leading to the bedrooms and den. I stopped just short of the guest bedroom door. Dana was right next to me. I noticed that Jerome was hanging back near the entrance to the living room. He was being discreet. Our spouses were in the bedroom. He wasn't going to go any farther unless he was needed. I gestured towards the open door. Dana nodded and then she took a deep breath and then stepped into the bedroom. I followed her. In front of me, Dana said, "Pete, Chicago is an 8-hour drive. If you're going to get there in time to have dinner with your client, you'd better hurry." She paused for a moment and then she continued, "Oh, that's right. How foolish of me. You weren't telling the truth. How could you have been? You haven't had a client in 5 years." Pete stopped moving. Katie pushed Pete's head to the side. For several seconds she stared at Dana with a puzzled expression, and then realizing that I was standing in the doorway, a look of horror swept across her face. She squeaked, "Frankie, what are you doing here? You're supposed to be in Kansas City." I shrugged. "I lied, Katie, but it appears that lately I'm not the only one who's been lying." Pete said, "Dana, honey, don't get the wrong idea. I've never seen this woman before. We met in a bar this afternoon. She got me drunk." Shaking her head in disgust, Dana said, "How did I ever fall in love with a pathetic worm like you? Pete, you're not even man enough to admit it when you're caught red-handed." "No, Dana, really, this is all a mistake. I can explain it." "Is that a fact? Will your explanation cover last night and Sunday afternoon at the King's Motor and 2? The two of you have been very busy lately." Munson stared at his wife in shock. I heard noises behind us. Glancing over my shoulder, I saw that Dana's dad, Herm Bennett, and his assistant, Dave, were standing in the doorway behind us. I tapped Dana's arm. She looked at me. I nodded my head towards her dad and his lawyer. Remembering Jeff Wheeler's instructions, we both stepped aside. Picking up his cue, Dave passed between us and walked over to the bed. Handing an envelope to Munson, he said, "Peter Munson, you have been served." Munson looked at the envelope and asked, "What is this?" Arthur Kendall stepped into the room. "They're divorce papers, you slimy, and if you weren't such a pathetic excuse for a lawyer you might have recognized them." Munson glared at his father-in-law. "You angry old bastard, this is all you're doing. You never liked me and you finally found a way to set me up. Well, you sure as hell aren't going to take me down. I'm going to sue you for entrapment." I smiled. Now it was my turn. I stepped forward. "Munson, Mr. Kendall didn't set you up. I did." Munson stared at me. He was puzzled. "You don't know who I am, do you?" He shook his head. I grinned. "I'm the fag engineer who's married to Katie. I'm the one who took you down." Now focusing his glare at me, Munson said, "You haven't taken me down. I'm going to rip your fag ass apart when we get into court." Shaking his head, Arthur Kendall said, "Sorry, Peter, but I don't think that's going to happen." "Yeah. How are you going to stop me?" "The question you should be asking is, how are you going to mount an attack?" "What do you mean?" "Everything you own, and I mean everything. That includes your car, your clothes, your credit cards, your checking account, and your house are all the property of Kendall Metal Fabricating. You might remember that we set it up that way for tax purposes." Smiling, Mr. Kendall continued, "I cannot begin to describe how happy I am to inform you that now that my daughter is filing for a divorce, we're taking all of that back." "Peter, right now your car is being driven to Northside Lexus so that it can be sold. Your credit cards have been canceled and your checking account has been closed. Oh, and this afternoon the locks on my daughter's house were changed. Your key no longer works. You can't do that." "Oh, but I can, and you cannot possibly imagine how much pleasure it gives me to do it." "Peter, right now all you have are the clothes that you wore here tonight and bills that are in your pockets." Suddenly frantic, Munson asked, "But what am I going to do? Where am I going to stay?" Mr. Kendall shrugged. "It appears that you're homeless. I've heard that freeway bridges provide reasonably good shelter. You might want to try them." "You wouldn't make me live on the street. You're not that kind of man." Mr. Kendall smiled. "Actually, Peter, I am that kind of man, and it would give me great pleasure to see you living on the street. But I do have an alternative for you." "What is it?" There was a wary tone in Munson's voice, but he was a cornered predator, willing to do anything to survive. Now it was Herm Bennett's turn to step forward. Mr. Munson, Mr. Kendall and his daughter want you out of their lives immediately. He reached into his suit jacket and removed an envelope. I have some papers for you to sign. They basically say that you agree to a divorce settlement in which you get nothing. Why would I do that? Mr. Munson, I suggest that you remember the prenuptial agreement that you signed prior to your marriage. In the event of a divorce resulting from infidelity, you get nothing. Since we have a video recording of everything that's occurred in this house this evening, we have ample evidence of infidelity. You can't make a video of me without my permission, and I didn't give you permission. Mr. Munson, you're wrong. This is Mr. Reese's house. He can record anything that occurs inside his house, and he doesn't need anyone's permission to do it. Munson glared at me. You did it. I smiled at him. Yep, I sure did. Turning back to Herm Bennett, Munson asked, okay, what do I get if I sign those papers? Mr. Bennett removed another envelope from his suit jacket. He opened it and showed Munson a stack of bills. This envelope contains $500 and a bus ticket to Los Angeles. There is also a business card for an attorney we work with in Los Angeles. If you contact him when you arrive, he will give you another $500. After that, every month that you stay away from Mr. Kendall's daughter and do nothing to contest or impede the divorce proceedings, you will receive another cash payment of $500. When the divorce becomes final with a ruling acceptable to Mr. Kendall and his daughter, you will receive a final payment of $1,000. $500. $1,000. That's chump change. I can't live on that. Mr. Munson, we agree. You might have to get a job. And a bus ticket. Why not a plane ticket? You always have the option to cash in your bus ticket and use that and the $500 we're giving you for an airplane ticket. Since you won't be getting any more money until you get to Los Angeles, I suggest that you might want to save your cash, but that's your decision. You may also wish to consider this. We will provide you with a ride to the bus depot, but that's the only place we'll take you. If you wish to go to the airport, you'll have to take either the city bus or a taxi cab. Can I stop at the house and pack a suitcase? Mr. Bennett shook his head. Absolutely not. If you attempt to go anywhere near the house, our offer will be withdrawn. But I don't even have a change of clothes. Mr. Munson, our original plan was to give you nothing. That would have left you homeless and destitute. That is still Mr. Kendall's first choice. I convinced him that paying you to leave town would be easier and less complicated for us. Yes, Mr. Munson, I know that you're a lawyer, and while you're not a very good one, I think you might have enough skill to force us to spend some valuable court time fighting you. In the end, you would still lose and end up with nothing, but we will undoubtedly have incurred some unnecessary legal expenses. Frankly, this option is cheaper for us, and that's the only reason we're doing it. The fact that it also benefits you is actually a detriment for us. You really believe that I'll end up with nothing if I try to fight you in court? Yes, Mr. Munson, I do. Munson stared at the floor. After a moment he sighed and said, okay, I'll sign the papers and take the money and the bus ticket. Mr. Bennett smiled. That's a wise decision, Mr. Munson. I notice that your clothes are in the living room. Go there now. After you get dressed, we'll have you sign the papers and then we'll take you to the bus depot. We'll give you the $500 and the bus ticket when we drop you off. As he walked out of the bedroom, he stared at the floor. He didn't look at anyone, not even Katie or Dana. He was a beaten man. Suddenly I realized that Katie and I were alone in the bedroom. Everyone else, including Dana, had followed Munson into the living room. During the interchange with Munson, Katie had pulled the bed covers up over her shoulders so they formed a protective shroud around her. She sat huddled under them, her arms wrapped protectively around her chest, her eyes downcast. Tears were running down her cheeks. I stared at her. After a moment I said, Katie. She looked up at me. Frankie, I'm so ashamed and I'm so sorry. Do I have to go to Los Angeles too? No, but they are going to serve you with divorce papers. Slowly nodding, she said, I guess I deserve that. I still love you, Katie, but I don't see how I can trust you anymore. I know. She paused for a second and then she said, Frankie, I love you. I really do. I love so much. It doesn't appear that you love me as much as you love Munson. Katie's eyes flashed. No, that's not true. I don't love Pete. I don't even like him. You're the only man I love. Frankie, you have to believe me, you're the love of my life. If that's true, then why were you willing to do things for him that you refused to do for me? What do you mean? I took the MP3 player out of my pocket and turned it on. As soon as she heard Pitt's voice, Katie looked at me in alarm. I quietly said, listen. I shut the MP3 player off and put it back in my pocket. I think that's enough. Staring at me in shock, Katie said, where did you get that? Last night the detectives recorded your date with Pete at the King's Motor Inn. You know about that? Yes. Hold it. Detectives recorded it. What did they record? Everything you said and did in the motel last night? She thought for a moment and then her eyes grew wide. Everything. Yes, everything. I shut it off before the end. Frankie, you must hate me. No, Katie, I don't hate you. I could never hate you, but I am disappointed. I don't care about any of the stuff you did. I'm not a prude. I shook my head. What bothers me is that you hid that part of yourself from me. You made me believe that you were a reserved prude, even when I asked you to do some things that were a little more adventurous. Sighing, I said, how am I supposed to reconcile your love? The only assumption that makes any sense to me is that you really do believe I'm a lousy husband, a stick-in-the-mud engineer. I think that's how you described me yesterday morning. Frankie, I said that in anger. I didn't mean it. Yes, you were mad because I was trying to get you to stay at home rather than meet your lover, a little treat that you were denying me. Katie moaned. Oh God, this can't be happening. It is happening, Katie. That's a fact that neither of us can deny. Frankie, I love you. You have to believe that. Actually, I do believe that, and I still love you too. I'll always love you, but right now I'm really angry with you. I feel cheated and deceived, and I don't trust you. I need to be away from you for a while. You said you were going to divorce me. I am. Katie stared at the wall for several seconds, and then she quietly said, I understand. I don't blame you. If I were you, I'd divorce me too. She looked at me. I won't fight it, Frankie. I don't deserve to have you. And then sighing with resignation, she asked, can I have a little time to pack some things before I have to leave? You don't have to leave. You can stay in the house. With you? There was a glint of hope in her eyes. I shook my head. No. I need to be away. I've taken a job in California. I'll be gone for at least 3 months. Frankie. Katie. It has to be this way. I hope that someday we might be able to be friends again, but before that can happen I need some time. I understand. I've made arrangements to ensure that you'll be okay. Our checking account has $2,500 in it. On the first of every month I'll add another $2,500. I also left you with your Visa card. It has a limit of $1,500. Use it. I'm having the bill sent to me. I'll pay off the full balance every month. Frankie, you don't have to do that. I know I don't. Katie, I have a very good income. I can easily afford it. Knowing that you'll always be well cared for is important to me, even after everything I did. Yes, even then. Katie looked at me. I really am sorry. I know I keep saying that, but right now I don't know what else to say. Maybe it's better if you don't say anything at all. Nodding, she said, maybe for right now, but later, after I've had a chance to think and figure it all out, I'd like an opportunity to try to explain. Could I do that, Frankie? Yes, but it will have to be later. Okay, thank you, Frankie. Katie, I have to go. This is hard for me. I can't do it anymore. I understand. Frankie, I really do love you. I know. I love you too, Katie. I turned and walked out of the bedroom. Dana and Dave, Herm Bennett's assistant, were sitting in the living room. When Dana saw me, she stood up and asked, are you okay? Yeah, I'll be fine. How's Katie? She'll be all right. Dave stood up. Mr. Reese, I still have to serve the divorce papers to your wife. Yes, of course you do. As he started for the bedroom, I realized that I couldn't bear the thought of Katie being alone when this happened. Dave, wait. Dave turned. Yes, sir. Let me go in first. Certainly. She was crying. I sat down next to her and gently picked up her hand. She looked up. When she saw me, she smiled. Are you going to stay with me, Frankie? No, I'm just going to sit with you for a few more minutes. One of the lawyers is going to serve you with the divorce papers. I thought it might be easier for you if I was sitting with you. Katie sat up. Frankie, you don't need to do this. Just tell him to go away. We don't need. But then she stopped. After a moment she whispered, no, I understand. You do have to do this. Tell him to come in. Dave was standing in the doorway. He was holding an envelope. I waved to him to come into the room. He walked up. Ms. Kathleen Jordan. Katie nodded. Yes, that's me. He handed Katie the envelope. These papers are a notification of Mr. Franklin Reese's intention to begin divorce proceedings against you. Consider yourself legally served. Katie nodded. Dave looked at me. Mr. Reese, is there anything else I can do for you? I shook my head. Then I'll excuse myself and leave you alone. He turned and walked out of the room. As soon as he was gone, Katie said, Frankie, thank you. Having you here with me while he did that helped. Katie, I have to go now. I know. I kissed her gently on the forehead and then I stood up. Smiling at me, Katie said, goodbye, Frankie. Be careful in California. I smiled back at her. Goodbye, Katie. You be careful here. And then I turned and walked out of the room. Dana was still waiting in the living room. She'd sat back down on the couch. As soon as she saw me, she stood up again. As I walked over to her, I asked, is Munson gone? He's on his way to the bus depot. Want to go out for a drink? I shook my head. No, I'm sorry. I think I'll take a rain check. I don't feel like celebrating right now. I think I'll just go back to my hotel room and go to bed. Nodding, Dana took my arm. Come on, you can walk me to my car. We walked arm in arm out of the house and down the sidewalk. Neither of us said anything. I think we were both emotionally drained. When we got to our cars, Dana said, "Frankie, thank you for everything. Your support made this much easier for me. You helped me to Dana. Will I see you again?" As a matter of fact, this morning Irv told me that he's made arrangements with Reitman Construction to have me fly back here for a day or two, every few weeks. He wants to keep me informed about the projects that Jupiter is working on here. As soon as I find out when I'll be coming back, I'll call you. We can make a dinner date. I'd like that. Will you take me to the Kensington Grill this time? Dana, I'd love to take you to the Kensington Grill. I'm already looking forward to it. Good night, Frankie. Dana kissed my cheek and got into her car. After I watched her drive away, I took one last look at the house that I'd shared with Katie for the past year, and then, overwhelmed with sadness, I got into my car and drove to my hotel.